crime is a social, financial, and emotional burden, and such burden is therefore distributed to the offender in a manner that reflects the degree to which they caused damage, and that is then distributed to the victimized individuals to the degree that governing forces believe they are owed. Determining the cost of victimization has always been acknowledged as an important step in handling a case. It used to be very normal in society for individuals to act in a vengeful and spontaneous manner against those who victimized them, therefore gaining a sense of justice and restoration. But now that we overall deem crime as a societal and interpersonal issue, restitution is purely beneficial in nature rather than violent, and it is determined by court officials and executives rather than the injured parties themselves. According to the textbook, in regards to cooperation with law in handling the redistribution of wealth after a crime, it is a felony for an injured party to demand or accept any payment as hush money to cover up a major violation of the law in return for not pressing charges, or as a motive for discontinuing cooperation with the authorities in an investigation or prosecution. This shows that once a crime is reported, victims do not really get to have full reign over what happens or how it's handled, even if they are happy with just accepting money for it. There are different types of restitution available, and the way that the personal opinion that one holds towards rehabilitation and its ultimate goal versus punishment likely influences the view that they have on restitution and which method of implication is the best. For example, there is community restitution, which includes community service from criminals. Symbolic restitution is when the offender cannot give that money back to the victim themselves, either because they do not want it or because they are deceased, and then they therefore donate it to an organization that reflects a characteristic of that victim. Or creative restitution, which is the ideal scenario, and victims are then left in a position where they are even better off than they had been before the crime took place because of the offender paying them back, but that's not common. Those also just are determined based on the extent of the crime and how harmful it was. Obviously, you're not going to get community service for a killing spree, but the relationship between the victim and the offender and their respective backgrounds also have connotations that are negative when repayment occurs. Even just being victimized via the confusing and long-haul process of engaging in the handling of your own case is a burden, and one that, as mentioned, repeatedly detracts people from wanting to pursue any sort of justice. The textbook describes that the practice of paying out of pocket for restitution on the offender's end can make it seem as though richer people are able to pay their way out of consequence, and that those from lower socioeconomic statuses who are then made to pay to their richer victims are then having to continue a oppressive cycle. In about 1/3 of the states, it's said that judges require felons convicted of violent acts to pay restitution as a part of their sentence, and it can be imposed out of pocket. This is to cover up the burden, again, of going through the process of being a victim and then also whatever the crime was in the first place. But there's even a discrepancy between who can afford protection from going through this in the first place. The textbook describes that those who can afford protection and increase their likelihood of reimbursement if they are victimized are those who are already belonging to a higher socioeconomic class. And those who sometimes even just attempt to get insurance are targeted and victimized. It says that those who are domestically abused are charged higher premiums from their insurance companies because they typically require more care and hospitalization. Insurance companies, medical insurance, any type of insurance, makes money by accepting more money from clients, and they pay out through reimbursements and then allowing that money to grow via interest from investments. So it's really not in their interest to actually insure their clients. They want to make sure they're always taking more than they're giving away. And this enforces this cycle of not only do victims not get to decide what happens to them, but they cannot even decide how and to what extent they are protected. And there is a discrepancy in who is protected and what rights certain